Good afternoon, everybody. It's a Tuesday. Life happens, and so we couldn't convene yesterday for what is the weekly edition of the Front Runner Football Podcast. The name is Kamza Mbatha, and as per usual, I'm joined by people who know something about something when it comes to football, and that's no different this evening. Joining me, I've got two SAFJA members, fully paid up, I think, last I checked. It's Rob Delport and Velile Mnyandu joining me on the back of their inaugural award for the footballer of the season for both men and women. We'll tuck into that. But before we go any further, big news coming out yesterday was the fact that Ajax, the overseas Ajax, who've had lots of ties with Ajax Cape Town, they've finally decided to sever ties. That'll come into full effect on the 1st of October. And so to kind of give us a picture of where it began, where the rumblings then began, and then how it's come to this end, Rob, we know that you've kind of been following Ajax from its genesis up until this point. And was it a good run that they can be proud to look back on, or has it all kind of fizzled out in a largely uninspiring manner that'll probably make people worry now as to the future of the club? Evening, welcome.
Evening, well, thanks. Yeah, it's an interesting time in Cape Town. Obviously, it's the end of an era. There have been some wonderful memories for some people and some not so wonderful memories for others. Let's just first look at it from Amsterdam's point of view. And it's fair to say that while it was a good partnership on a social and those sorts of things, it might not have been a wonderful business partnership. Because the fact is that when they did get involved, a lot of it was to be a feeder for Ajax Amsterdam, to get players to move to Europe. And in 21 years, well, it's basically been 3 first-team players for Ajax Amsterdam and 4 or 5 reserve players. And in 21 years, that's not necessarily a great reward. So from their point of view, you can understand the end of the partnership. Look, they've given a lot to South African football. Not only have they invested in infrastructure and things like that? Of course, the South African partners have also put a lot of money into that. But they also passed on a lot of knowledge. You know, we've had a Dutch influence in South Africa for 21 years that has passed on most probably to other clubs. You know, it's not just Ajax directly. I mean, we've had Dutch coaches at Orlando Pirates. We've had Dutch coaches at Cape Town City, and all of it does connect, and I think it's a very sad situation that we've reached this point. Not only that the partnership has ended, that we can also reflect on the fact that a club like Ajax, which really is one of our leading developers as a country, has only actually sent that fewer players across to Europe.
It's not a good return on investment. What now, though, for the gentlemen like Ari who are behind the club now, obviously majority shareholders now? There's word that the club will be renamed back to its original, I guess, name. And then does that mean they then stay in the NFT? And of course, how does it work in terms of, or lastly, actually, I want to find out, do you think they would have still split had they made the promotion stakes, had they been promoted to the big time? Do you think this was always coming, or was it something hinging whether to see if there's any progress from them moving from the Glad Africa to what has now become the DStv Premiership?
Well, here's the thing. The relationship over the past few years between Amsterdam and Cape Town has not been brilliant. I can't remember a season in the past few years where the rumor mill didn't suggest that Amsterdam was going to pull out. And I personally think whether or not they were promoted, they would have. Most probably the only difference that it most probably makes is the price that the South Africans paid. I'm pretty sure playing for buying out half a Premiership franchise is a lot more money than buying out half a Glad Africa Championship franchise. And it goes back to the return on investment from Amsterdam's point of view. I mean, they're not a charity. And I think in a way that's where it had become for them. It was giving back, investing in things, but not necessarily getting the reward. Yes, today they announced that they're applying for the Cape Town Spurs name. And going back, this also tells you a lot about South African football history and franchises and that, is that not many people at the time were all that up in arms to see the back of Cape Town Spurs, despite their history, because they bought into the Ajax Cape Town thing. But in truth, I think it was just Cape Town Spurs' 50th anniversary. So if this is what's going to happen, it could be the return of a South African franchise. And we're still not 100% sure what Ari is going to be doing. If he's going to be carrying on, we do know they're applying for the name, but maybe he's going to sell the club. Maybe he's going to buy a Premiership franchise. We're still a little in the dark with that. But I always try to find a silver lining in every cloud. And the return of Cape Town Spurs, that's a silver lining.
Okay, Stavij, your take on this issue in terms of this end of an era? Rob touching on the fact that it was just a bad investment or becoming a bad investment and not being able to see the return on it for Ajax. But also in a sense, I guess it's an indictment against Ajax Cape Town that they weren't able to turn over enough overly talented, let's say, because they've got good players, but obviously for them to then be exported, they'd have to be truly exceptional. That also kind of brings into the spotlight the fact that they weren't able to manage that situation.
Good evening, Kamza, and also to our friends who are joining us, watching this podcast, and also to a fellow SAFJA ex-com member there, Sir Robbie. But this is not just an indictment on Ajax only, but on South African football as a whole. And if you read the line where Ajax has expressed the ambition to reach the top of European football, and in recent years the South African football market has not produced enough talent at the level that Ajax strives for. And moreover, Ajax does not see sufficient potential for the future. But I think before that, Ajax concluded that the ambitions and results in Amsterdam are in too great contrast to the development of the football market in South Africa. It says a lot. It says a lot. This is not just about Cape Town. The fact that this country, we cannot point a single player who is playing in the EPL, who is playing in the La Liga, who is playing in the Bundesliga. Now, these are the top 3 leagues globally, and you look at Zimbabwe has got players in the EPL, they've got a player in the EPL, Zimbabwe have got a player playing for a top team, which was in the Champions League, in Kadewere, who's playing for Olympic Lyon. You know what I mean? I'm trying to bring here closer to home, So this should not be seen in isolation. That is it's an Ajax issue. It's not just an Ajax issue. It talks to South African football as a whole. And we can continue to ignore it and just put it and look at there. Okay, yes, we know. The problems have always been there, as Rob has just said, between Ajax Cape Town and also Ajax Amsterdam. The issue of Hans Vonk, the fallout between Hans Vonk and the REF Statio or the Ajax Cape Town management. It was there. Even last season, it was there. You would have a technical director who comes from Holland, Hans Vonk, wanting to go this direction. The ones in Cape Town want to go this direction. It's always been there. But for me, I think if there was a statement which was frank and is not just looking at Ajax Cape Town only, it's this one. But I think also the current management at Ajax Cape Town should shoulder the blame. There was a time when Ajax Cape Town had proper structures. You knew that even some of the top youth talent will come from Ajax Cape Town. But how many players in recent years you can say this has been exceptional talent coming from Ajax Cape Town? Even in the current team, you're counting Grand Megaman and who? You know, and I'm not saying there are no top players. Yes, there are some players, but it's not like Ajax Cape Town used to produce players that you knew that this player can walk. It's not a matter of Bafana or under 23. In fact, it's not a matter of under 20 or under 23. This player, as young as he is, he can walk to the Bafana team. That was the Ajax Cape Town.
Yep.
You know, but in recent years, the structures. I remember our colleague Mjaka asking a question during a SAFJA presser recently with RF statue. And one of the questions was asked about the scouts. You know, Ajax didn't have a strong scouting network and scouting team that they used to have before. These were the things. You knew that Ajax, they would get the best talent in South Africa. This is how they got Hlachwayo, they got Serrero. This is how they got players like Tlantla Shabalala, players coming from outside the province. You know what I mean? This is how they got.
And it also,
you know,
just to add to that, it also, you know, the guys who went to Europe, Stephen Pienaar, Tulani Serrero, both of them are not necessarily Cape Town boys. You know, they came from School of Excellence roots. So it also it's an interesting situation because over the past few years, the academy used to have a different level of coach as well, and it also talks about ambition of coaches, because you must think that Kevin Johnson, Noel Cousins, Ian Taylor, these were youth coaches at Ajax Cape Town, and over the years, maybe the coaching level wasn't as good as well.
That's true. I mean, you always hear it being said that the best coaches should be for your youngsters. So now, who do we look to develop players? I mean, you know, because obviously, as far as the conveyor belt is concerned, if you're removing one part, which is Ajax, who are the big clubs that are now
add Wits to that? And add Wits to that.
Yeah, Wits as well. Wits and Ajax, you're right. Two good academies now kind of, you know, going to be left in the wilderness. Who now will develop and address those issues that Ajax bring up in that statement?
Yeah, no, you see, for me, it's sad because I've traveled with our junior national teams, especially under 20, to the World Cups, also to the AFCONs, and also I've been to the Olympics as well, you know, or also to the COSAFA Cup where some of the teams will be playing, and even All Africa games. And one thing, you know, most of the time these junior teams were always dominated by Ajax players and Bidvest players in recent years, you know. So now we're talking about, I mean, somebody this afternoon was also talking about the Lambda Institute that Ajax has just built, you know. But I think maybe this is what I want to hear from Rob in terms of the premises, Ikamva. As much as everything is going to change, but the new Cape Town Spurs, I don't see them moving away from Ikamva, you know, because they have bought back their shares, and I would imagine that those shares now, they were cheaper. I mean, it's not a PSL status now. It's a, you know, so they were cheaper. So
are you saying, Steph, there's someone at Ajax who went, phew, when they didn't qualify or get promoted?
No. The issue of promotion was always going to be central to this, you know, because you cannot be associated with a big brand like Ajax Amsterdam and be campaigning in the second tier in South Africa. I'm saying this knowing fully well the circumstances which led to Ajax being in that division, you know. But I think what has also been a last straw is for Ajax to fail to gain promotion on the back of the acrimonious relations that they've had, especially since the beginning of this year, which resulted in Coach Anders Alderinge leaving Ajax Cape Town, returning to Holland. You understand? So based on that, it was either they win promotion or, you know, so there've been stories. There've been stories about the relationship between the two. So I think not getting the promotion was the last straw, you know, because also Ajax Amsterdam cannot continue to have a brand associated with them that is campaigning in a division that is not at elite level in South Africa.
And
Having been together at this level for 21 years.
And that might have been easier if the relationship was brilliant. You know, if Ajax Amsterdam and Ajax Cape Town were as close or as thick as thieves, perhaps it would have been easier for them to like, you know, support them during this time. What I noticed over the past year or so was that it seemed like Hans Vonk and Amsterdam were trying to get the club back to more of a Dutch feel about it. And there was another little power battle that happened there, where it almost felt like it was a battle for who was going to be in control of the club. And from a South African point of view, I think that's always been a problem, is that I think the two parties did have different objectives. You know, the Ajax, obviously the guys in South Africa were focused on South African football, South African league, performing well there, where perhaps the Amsterdam guys were like, yes, but we want individual players to come through and be developed at the right age. You know, the truth is that there are very few 18-year-olds in South Africa who are at the level of a 16-year-old in Amsterdam. So even when South African players did go across there was a lot of catch-up for them to play. And then they'd still have to adapt. They're more expensive because you have to put them up. So it sometimes didn't also make financial sense. I mean, even the last two South African boys who went to Amsterdam, Dean Solomons and Leo Tatani, they spent 2 or 3 years basically playing in the reserves. And while they may have careers somewhere else in Europe, it could be like a Dalen Klaassen situation, who went through to Amsterdam but never broke into the first team, then went and made a bit of a name for himself in Belgium, but he didn't quite fit in. And to be fair, Dalen is a lot more ahead of some of these other guys, because before Dalen left, he was playing first team football. So it's a tricky situation that happened, and it's at least the positive thing to say is that it's now over. You know, the whatever happens, that relationship, which I've dealt with for 10 years, of whether Amsterdam's going to pull out, whether they're not, who's fighting this. Now we either going to have a club in the hands of South African owners who succeeds, or perhaps we're not. Perhaps they're going to sell it all. What Velile asked, at the moment, the infrastructure is part of the club. So they will carry on there. So they're going to have the best facilities again to use. But there's also talk, I've heard talk, I mean, unfortunately, a lot of it is rumors, that perhaps they want to sell that because it is a wonderful asset that it comes from.
For sure. Okay, before we finalize this one, and Dando on YouTube had a question, you know, because he agrees with the fact that the whole Ajax thing is an indictment on SA football, but he wants to know, do you, any of you, get a feeling that the people in charge are in any way concerned about the state of SA football currently and going forward? And Rob, this kind of feeds into that little discussion we're having prior to getting on, in terms of you have chairmen who are wise and know what their strengths are and what their weaknesses are. They know they can't compete at the highest level sometimes, but they can churn out good players that they can then sell on. But in general, gents, I mean, are our owners and clubs that perceptive? Because it's kind of dawned on me in this discussion that we probably, as a league and as a country, from a football development perspective, we've just gone about 2 steps back. And that's a scary, scary proposition. And I'm glad we're having this podcast, because I think people could read that Ajax story and think, oh, well, end of Ajax and the relationship. But like, you know, Velile details that statement. These guys are people who know football are saying that you guys aren't doing enough to develop as a nation, a footballing nation. So back to Dando's question here is, you know, are the people in charge concerned about the future, or are enough of them concerned about the future?
You know, it's this is something that I've always said. You know, there's no doubt that you know, if you even look on the announcement of the new league sponsor last week, Commercially, we're doing very well.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, we are set to be in the top 10 in the world. Also,
From a revenue perspective, you mean top 10?
Yes. We're only comparable to the North Africans here on the continent when it comes to the commercial side of the game. But the core business, and I think I did say this even last week here, the core business continues to suffer. You know, I did say here earlier that we're struggling. We don't have players in the big leagues, you know. And also, sometimes I find it laughable that people expect Bafana Bafana to perform miracles, yet without we're complaining about the standard of the game. Yeah, you know. We you know, the other day, Coach Peter was also talking about this, you know, that we don't have the best players. You know, we don't have the best players. It's I don't know. But you know what? We've been talking about this for a very long time, and nothing is happening from the superiors, both at SAFJA and PSL. This is an area that doesn't seem to be prioritized. You know, I remember what gave birth to Vision 2022. It was after we had failed to qualify for the AFCON in 2011, going to 2012. Under Patrice Motsepe. And at that time, they then came up with this Vision 2022. There was a big technical symposium. You know, this technical symposium, it had PSL coaches, it had coaches from all over the place. And Saramel Litsoka was still the technical director at the time. The president at the time was still Kestina Matandani, you know. And then it gave birth to this Vision 2022. Then this thing just remains a document. You know, technically, you can see the implementation in other areas, but technically, the implementation is not strong. You know, the PSL clubs, some clubs, in terms of the proper structures, are found wanting. Yes, you've got some few clubs which are doing things right, but there are some clubs, you know, their operation technically is not different to an amateur team. How can we produce talent when we like this? You know.
You know, I mean,
yesterday I was listening to Coach Pizzo. We were talking about this thing, and we were talking about teams not affording to sign players at this stage, maybe because they're not strong financially. But he was having a simple question, and it's a very simple question. You know, what is so difficult in teams having scouting networks? You know, scout talent. You know. And scouting talent and bringing that talent to be coached by skilled coaches, not because coach no Ankela Kamza, you know, or it's a cousin to Rob Delport.
For sure, but I mean, I think that you require a lot of things to be working all in the same direction. You can have scouts, but like you say, if it's not the top coaches bringing in, you know, that you're bringing those players to, then a strut of that system is not as good as it should be. So yes, you can scout, but if you're not going to have the best coaches to coach what you're bringing in, then, you know, also as a player, you're like, why would I want to go there if they don't have the right infrastructure? There's a lot of things.
But a coordinated technical approach where you know that as SAFJA and PSL, you're saying these are the standards, you know, and for a coach to come here, or even for you in your technical structures, to have these coaches must be vetted, and they must go through a process, you know, because now if you have skilled coaches in your junior teams, there is no way you cannot produce good talent. Because firstly, you'll be guided by the scouting plan, which is following what the FA will be requiring you to do. And then from the scouting, you push in that talent to your under-17s, to your under-19s, to your PSL MDC team, which is not coached by just an ex-player who used to play for you, but has never been coaching anywhere. And then a head coach is fired, and then you take that player with no qualifications to sit on the PSL bench. What is that?
And, you know, the thing is, the problem with Vision 2022, from a national point of view, is you need all the professional clubs to also buy into Vision 2022. Because picking young is all fine and well. But picking young and inexperienced players, you're just going to burn them.
Sure.
The fact is that it's easy for a country like Brazil to pick 10, 20-year-olds when those 20-year-olds have all played 150 club games. I think back to the Under-20 World Cup, where I think we had Mabaliso, Langerman, and maybe Tebogo Langerman, maybe a handful of guys who'd actually played first-team games. And we got results against teams who had players where every single player had been playing first-team football. Those guys now went back to their countries and have played another 100 club games since, where some of our under-20s came back and went and played MDC, or went and played for a reserve team, or went and played NFD, not the same level. So to expect a 22-year-old, just any 22-year-old, if we have to only pick a young national team, we only selecting from 20 players because there's only 20 players with experience. So we don't have a choice. You know, Grant Langerman should not be the only person, or Grant Langerman, Tebogo Langerman, and Musele from Baraka. Or actually Tebogo's a little older, but they have the right amount of experience for their age. Every club should have somebody like that. And that's going back to Ajax. That's the big loss. Because someone like Thulani Klatshwayo, by the time he went to Wits, he had 100-odd games behind him already. That he has, and that's the way all our footballers should actually be. You know, the fact is that we're relying on guys who sometimes make their first team debuts at 22, and we've missed such an important part of their development. You know, a lot of Velile was talking about scouts and that. A lot of our clubs, we do have decent scouts, but sometimes we don't have good matchmakers. You know, we'll have a club that will say, oh, that guy's good at this place, we must go and sign him. But they forget that they should actually be matching him with the coach's tactics, with the players in the team. So they sign this player, and then he sits at that club for 3 years,
but the problem,
and doesn't develop any further.
But the problem that, Rob, it's not a coordinated thing, you know? It's like, and it's not even a scout. No, you know, someone is going to recommend a player. But, you know, if all clubs, and look, we're not saying the clubs should all be at the same level. You know, I mean, if you look at what a club like Sevilla is doing with Monchi there, you know, they know that they're not always going to be competing with Atletico Madrid, Barcelona, or Real Madrid. But you know what? They're making a lot of money from scouting all over the world, you know,
Sure.
And different clubs, you know, different clubs. So I think, and I'm saying this, where I'm saying the issue of commercial, being one of the top leagues commercially, is also counting against us in a way, because I remember when we went to the Under-20 World Cup, we had some of our players who were wanted by overseas teams, you know, but they can't just move easily like that, because they're not like your Nigerian players who are going there playing just for academies. And if an interested club comes, they'll just be released. You know what our clubs do before these players go to the international tournaments? They make them to sign professional contracts. And what they do, they will play them just for one game. So, and then when an offer comes from overseas, they're asking for telephone numbers. This is a true story. It happened with this week. This week I was watching Victor Osimhen of Nigeria. What is he today? He's the most expensive African footballer. Bought by Napoli from Lille. This is the same player. There's also Chikwueze. Chikwueze was playing for Villarreal against Barcelona. You understand? These are the boys who played against Rui Frosler, Montlimpoto, They played against Atenko Sidlala. You know, they played against Tendo Mukumela and the under 17 AFCON. You know, in 2015, and we beat them. You know, then they went to the World Cup. They won the under 17 World Cup. Where are they today? And where are our players? You know what I mean?
For sure.
Because and I mean, look at. I remember I was with him in South Korea, and he had a great game against Italy. And the Italian coach was raving about him. Wiseman Meyiwa. Unfortunately, now he's permanently injured. And I would learn years later, that the boy had offers from Denmark, from France, from Belgium, you know, and he couldn't go, you know.
Yeah,
and he's not the only one.
Clubs.
You know, he's not the only one. So, unfortunately, sometimes we are victims of our own success, you know, but also it doesn't stop the fact that we're not producing the best talent.
For sure.
I think what I was just going to say, what I think is sometimes sad is that we have stood in the way of so many players over the years. I mean, we go back to with Swallows winning the league, Cheesy's told lots of stories about how before he even played for Orlando Pirates first team, there have been offers for him, and he doesn't know what happened with them. I think the first one, his parents said he had to finish his education. And then after that, and I know of so many players who've had clubs interested in them, and for whatever reasons, the deals didn't happen. Mostly, it goes back to what Velile said. They were outpriced. They were, you know, the fact is the European clubs were buying an unknown quantity. They have no idea what to expect with those South African guys. We sometimes made our products a little more valuable because of our internal markets, because, you know, Sundowns is willing to pay this, or Chiefs is willing to pay that. And I do think football has a difficult thing because we're relying on private individuals to develop for the nation. And a lot of the time, those private individuals are worried about the situation of their club. And it's why you see so many coaches not play youth players, because those coaches are so worried about their job that they'd rather play the trusted old guy who they kind of know what they're going to get than gamble on a kid who could be magic, who could be terrible. And there are many times I've seen the 28-year-old get selected, knowing all and well that the 18-year-old could be twice as good a player if he could just get on the field and get that experience.
Oh, gosh, it sounds like there's going to be a need for a whole cultural change as far as how we approach our football. And, you know, I mean, it's just every time we have this discussion.
We're a crisis, but I don't want us to prolong this thing. But we're a serious crisis when it comes to the technical side of the game. You know, we have a serious crisis.
But it's why.
And it's unfortunate that those in power don't seem to be doing enough to correct these things.
It's why when we spoke to Tim Sukazi at SAFJA the other day, and I threw the question in because I was interested, because it was good to hear Tim talk about youth development at the club and something that's important to him, because if we're going to have new owners, those are the types of owners that I want. I want to know that they care about the kids at their club, because that's what a club is. A club is not just the first team. The first team is your guiding light. But it's I don't know. I guess maybe I don't have the money to own a club, but if I did, I think I would really, really like to know that the 13-year-old, I would like to see him reach the pinnacle. That to me would be a success. And there must be, you know, that sort of, and not just reach the top at my club, but if I had a 13-year-old get an opportunity to go overseas when he's 18, his story continues forever, being connected to us. So I think a lot of the time I hope that we do see clubs, owners like Tim talking it, and now we need to see him acting it. He mentioned that there's a bunch of 18-year-olds who he is hoping to see playing DSTV Premiership football this season.
Right.
So that's what we got to hope all our owners are like.
Okay, well, just let's move on to the transfer market, because obviously deals are being done. We've seen the likes of obviously Orlando Pirates and Mamelodi Sundowns unveil some players. Chippa United did the same today. We're hearing rumors about Swiso Hlanti training with Kaizer Chiefs, obviously whilst they wait on the outcome of their appeal. So the market is moving, but I'm guessing not everybody can, kind of apply themselves with as much energy due to, in part, it being COVID related as far as money and cash flow. Are we going to just see now the era of the guys at the top consolidating themselves with the opportunity to get players on the cheap, to kind of get some of the best players at the clubs that can't afford them? It seems like the haves and the have-nots are about to grow in distance between each other, with what's about to be a unique transfer window because of the COVID crisis we've just come out of.
Yeah, no, look, in fact, for some time now, the PSL market has been dominated by free agents in terms of transfers. Mm. But you would get to see some moves then there. You have a group of clubs who should be looking when they buy from the PSL. In fact, when they get a player from the PSL, they'll not be buying, they'll be getting a free agent, or there'll be swap deals, a lot of swap deals, especially in the mid-season transfer window. And then,
really, for such a money-centric league, surely that's, I don't understand that. If we're all about money, how is it always about free agents and no one actually willing to say, here's money for a player that you've developed, or I'm buying value? It's just always seems to be a free agent market. And, you'll know the guy from Wits and Jose, who was seen as an expert at kind of counting and running down contracts before he can snatch someone on a free agent deal.
Supersport were also another club like that as well. But look, it's since the day of the Kutse ruling in Europe, they call it the Bosman ruling.
Yes,
the free agency has always been there. But those clubs, when they buy players, they either buy players from the lower divisions, be it Great Africa Championship or Patrice Motsepe. But there, that whichever player that you're buying is going to be for less than R1 million most of the time, So there's no issue. And then they buy that player performs well. Within a few seasons, that player is playing in a big club, and they make a lot of money. But also it's also comes with understanding that different clubs operate on different models. Sure. I'm talking about clubs that understand models, because there are other clubs that are just operating and you don't understand what is their model. So in this case, you must also understand that the clubs are run by business people, and businesses have been severely affected by COVID-19, and you don't run a PSL club just based on a monthly grant. It's not enough monthly grant
for
the operations of the club. Of so the business people running the clubs, they have to top up most of the time, to run the teams. And you find that someone, his business has not been operating since the lockdown started, level 5, and it only started now maybe in level 2. So this has affected him, because he's had to pay salaries throughout that period, and so it's been very, 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 very bad. I remember we had an interview recently on the SAFJA platform with Jose Ferreira, who's the PSL Exco member, and he was talking about this, that he's not surprised that there are some club owners who are looking to sell their clubs, because they've been really affected by this. And remember, Stan Matthews did say this not long ago, So, I mean, you will see the teams. There are teams in the PSL which are soldering on, but if a big money offer was to come, they would release. They would release because it has not been easy. Because sometimes I know that we comment just because we don't like this buying of status, but I think it's not just the buying of status; it's the buying of status and the relocation. Because you live a community which has invested emotions and everything to this, and you move. So, but at the same time, I don't want us to paint the selling of status as a very, very bad thing, because remember, this is somebody's business.
For sure.
And somebody's business, the money comes from his family as well. You understand? So, must the club go bankrupt? Or must he go bankrupt himself? So that's why they say it's a willing buyer, willing seller market. But you also can't rule out the unfortunate part where others now have seen this as an opportunity to offer quick money scheme.
Sure.
You buy a team in the first division for 8 million, you promote it to the PSL, and then you sell it for 50 million or 60 million.
Sure.
So those are the things. But I think for now, let's take into consideration the period that we're in now of this COVID and is contributing to this. And unfortunately, who is going to be heavily hit here is the so-called smaller clubs. When a team like SuperSport United, that that has got some of their salaries are here, but they are also crying. Then you must know that we are in serious trouble. And as I've said, there are only 2 clubs currently with Chiefs band which are buying players. It's Sundowns and Pirates.
Right.
And to an extent, Chiefs is also buying.
I mean, Rob, are we about to see an influx of a lot of free agents? Because, I mean, obviously as clubs, you can't have bloated squads now. If you're thinking about your overheads, if you're thinking about keeping things, slim as far as your wage structure is concerned, we might see, a lot of unemployed players. All this on the back of the unemployment numbers in our own country coming out. So, we mustn't sit here and think
You just used the word I was going to use. You call them free agents, and I call them unemployed players, because there are thousands of them. Not dozens, there are thousands. Again, as football manager, researcher, my job for the video game is to track players' careers. And so every time a professional player comes around, or some semi-professional players, I keep track of them.
Right.
Half of my database are players who are uncontracted. Over the years, every single year, more people join the unemployment queue. They're not free agents. And it's made the market very interesting in South Africa, because really, apart from Sundowns, and I even talk with Pirates and Chiefs, I don't think it's completely like this. No other coach can put a wish list out and get the players on his wish list. Our teams here are made up of, it's like, instead of, sometimes when you wake up and you feel like something to eat and you think, I feel like lasagna. But then when you get to the restaurant, there's no lasagna, there's spaghetti, and there's this, you choose the spaghetti because it's close. That's what free agent purchasing is like. You're not getting what you want or who you want unless you're very lucky. You're getting the next best thing. And it's very hard to build a winning team from a bunch of next best things. If you're willing to spend the money, you get what you want. Then you can actually build a team. But to do that, you also need an owner who believes in his coach, who believes his coach is going to be there in 4 years' time. Because I don't know how many teams I know in South Africa who are rebuilding every 6 months. Players come, players go. Coaches have an idea of what they want. They sign somebody, then they get sacked, then that player gets moved on. And it's this ongoing cycle of rebuilding, which is kind of like even our national team is, it affects everything, this knock-on effect. And it's hard to build a club if you're not going to spend money. And you also, the fact is the difference between Sundowns and I guess Pirates and Chiefs in this case is it's hard to build a team when those teams exist in that type of structure, because they're always going to come for your star. You know, your Sundowns is not going to Maritzburg and saying, give me your 8th best player. They want your best player.
Right.
So then that team has to start, who might have started to build around that player, signs a free agent to replace him. And you can't just replace your best player with a free agent. And so it's a scary cycle, because obviously, yes, we understand the situation. Many of us journalists understand this COVID situation with no work than the football guys. And it is a difficult situation. But if you really want your business to succeed, you have to spend in the right areas. And I think a lot of our teams don't do that. And there's a reason why the team that does is winning as much as they do. Because even their reserves are their second best choices.
That is a very good point. You make a very good point. As far as teams and models and knowing what they're doing, Savage, I mean, Swallows have signed a throng of free agents. I mean, you know, on the back of what Rob has said about, you know, are those players the players that they would have ideally wanted? Are those players going to keep them up and make them a formidable team? I mean, you know, do you see a plan there, or do you see some structure in their acquisitions, or is it just a case of, hey, let's get people with experience in this league and hope for the best?
Yeah, a very interesting point that you've just made. I'll read because Sleke Dumukhale is one of the top youth coaches around. He's a member of the South African Football Coaches Association as well, SAFJA. And he's written here, development of a player is built up of few pillars: a club philosophy, a scouting network, coaching curriculum, a club program, and national competitions, plus international competitions and national team selections. So he says our players tend to grow up without an international competition background from under 12, under 13, under 15, and we struggle versus our counterparts on the continent. And I think that's one of the reasons that CAF is now, there was under 17, but now they're going a bit down, you know. There's going to be under 15s now as well, you know. But from what Slekedi, who's also watching our program, is saying here, and it's very important in relation to your question. The club philosophy. What is Swallows' philosophy? How many clubs that you can say there's a philosophy? There's a certain philosophy that is being followed. Even when what informs a club when they have to go and search for a new coach, what type of a coach that they're looking for, and that coach, what kind of influence in terms of the club culture and the philosophy that he will have to work within, and also, is there a sporting director that is going to be working under, you know? And this is why in some clubs, even here on the continent, when they fire a coach, they also fire the technical director or sporting director.
Sure.
How you call it, because he is part of the project.
Yes.
You understand?
Yes.
So those are the people, together with the scouting network and the coaching curriculum in the club, you know? Those are the people who are in charge of the process. I know that it follows, I think the technical director the last time I checked was Fanny Madida. So I'll be interested to see if he's involved in this process of bringing in players and the type of players that they're going for as well. Because one of the problems that we've had previously with teams which have just been promoted from the lower division, especially in the National First Division, you will find that once they get promoted, they clean their squad and then they bring in new players altogether. And remember, those players still have to gel. And also, we are going to have a very short pre-season this time around. And it's not going to be a proper pre-season because the season has just finished, you know. And the turnaround is going to be very quick. In fact, I think we are only 2 weeks away from the new season. You know, we're 2 weeks away from the new season because this is already the first week of October. Of October. Next week is the international week, and the other week the season is supposed to start. You know, so when you bring in an entirely new team, you must be very careful. That's why Coach Peter was saying the other day that to start the season, he could be playing the MTN 8 with with the old squad, and then as the season progresses, then he starts to introduce the new squad as well. The new players. So let's wait and see, because some of the players Swallows have signed good players from their clubs, Letlabika. Also, Hamel has been a decent player, at Chippa, and also from Steenbeek, where he comes from. Yeah. I think he was on 11 goals, Rob?
Yeah.
Yep, from the first division. So, yeah, they've been signing good players there and there. Musadi, PSL, after 2 seasons in the Great Africa, I don't know.
Tama?
Yeah, experience. You can, Nyatama, the experience has always been there, and also is one of the very good players to have in the dressing room as well. So, yeah, but don't overdo it.
Yeah.
Don't overdo it. Yes, beef up the team, but don't overdo it. But let's wait and see.
Okay. And
yeah, I think just to add to what V said, I mean, with Swallows, it's an interesting one because there is such a short turnaround. So he has brought in a lot of experienced players. I think also a few players that Brandon Trutter knows. And I think that might have been a consideration. It obviously does get more concerning the more players that sign, but that also could be based on who they're releasing. Because I'm going to be honest with you, having watched the Glad Africa this season, I don't think any of the teams in the league were ready to be Premiership teams. It's why there was so many. There were changes in the lead. If Ajax had got promoted, they would have had to sign 8 players to be at the standard. I think the same with Swallows. Like V said, it happens a lot. The only time I can really think that it didn't happen was the season where Highlands Park got relegated and kept all their players. That season in the NFD, Highlands Park looked like a Premiership team waiting to play in the Premiership, and then they ran away with the league. And they didn't have to make many signings, but they still did. So I look at Swallows players, and I some of them are very exciting. I think they've signed players who shone against them. This was although he didn't necessarily have the best bubble with injuries and things like that. This was most probably Mosadi's best season for Ajax since he joined Ajax. He reminded me an older, wiser version of the guy he was at Tuks. Muketsi, who they signed from JDR Stars, is a very exciting player. He's like a Percy Tau, Kamugelo Mkhlatsi, scores goals, makes things happen, and I'm very interested to see how he does. I would have really, I just hope they don't struggle, because the difficulty with seeing a new player in a top flight is when they're in a struggling team, you don't necessarily see them shine. But it's going to be interesting to see who they kept as well, because they've announced a few players that their contracts that they've renewed, but we're still talking about only 18 or 19 players mentioned so far. So they're going to be. It's going to be interesting to see how they do, because also the thing is that, like, even with the transfers you mentioned with Chipper earlier. Decent signings, but they've also released a bunch of guys. So now it goes back to what Veli said about the short preseason, is they technically could have kind of a new team to put together in 2 weeks. So don't be surprised if it's the guys like Sundowns, guys like Chiefs, who at the moment have pretty much the same squads, players haven't left, who challenge at the beginning, or even the guys like Cape Town City, who in the bubble were brilliant, or Supersport. Sometimes it's not only about new signings; it's about getting the best out of the players you already have. Sure. And again, I know I'm in Cape Town, and so I was watching it very closely with Cape Town City in the bubble. But one of the beautiful things that happened at Cape Town City was Mabara and Phillies, who had been at the club the whole season but never quite gelled, and then suddenly in the bubble they were just a brilliant centre-back partnership.
Right.
So they've suddenly got something that they didn't have for most of the previous season to build on now.
They'll be very interesting to see in terms of who starts well when the season resumes. This is the teams that have tinkered, because like you guys say, it's very difficult to kind of gel with the short turnaround times that we've got coming our way. There seems to be an influx of Tabos on the free agency market. Velile, Thabo Mnyamani.
Doesn't mean joy, it means free.
Yeah, exactly. Rachale, and then Matlaba joining them as well. I mean, some experience in and amongst those names, and some who, I guess, have a point to prove at their next club if they find one. I mean, that's the tricky part, is that that these players have quality. Have they shown it in recent times? Probably not. Are they going to just join the unemployment queue, or do you see some of them kind of being able to find places where they're going to be utilized and are required?
Yeah, that's a tricky one, because previously, I mean, players like Rachale, once it becomes available on the market, he'll be picked up,
Exactly, they jumped at him.
Yeah. But Matlaba, when he complains about family, so you get the feeling that he wants to be closer to home. So maybe he's coming to a Gauteng-based team. So, I know that there was also a talk of, even with Rachale as well, whether he comes to Gauteng, come back to Gauteng, or he goes to Durban, So even there, it will be interesting. But I think also the issue of a free agent, it also depends, how do you become a free agent, At the time you became a free agent, were you at your peak? How are you on the field of play? Because I feel that someone like Matlaba, for me, was very effective at Black Leopards. You could see him, even without the armband in the playoffs, he was showing leadership there, so I think maybe there's another route for him. But a player like Mnyamane has not been playing for a very long time at SuperSport, and also has been affected by injuries as well. But he remains a quality player, I know that there's been talk of him in Chippa United, but maybe he will want to stick around Gauteng as well. So to be a free agent,
what about section?
To be a free agent, you can have a big name, but also your performance from your previous teams, especially your latest team, if it was not satisfactory, that is not a good reference point for you.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I always think that footballers should be playing football. And this is the problem with a lot of these free agents, is that you know how many times you'll see a guy maybe play 6 games in 2 or 3 seasons, and they're trying to get a contract based on their reputation. So they're like, yeah, but I played for Bafana 5 years ago, so I should be getting this amount of money. And that also comes into it, is, with a lot of the free agents, especially free agents who played at some of the bigger clubs, they get used to a certain salary. And your salary should be based on your performance, not your name. And unfortunately, you have to choose. Is 10,000 Rand better than naught? Because that's what you're earning when you're waiting for the salary. I've always found like the guys who actually pull through that are the ones who are just hungry to play. They'll go join their ABC Motsepe team with knowing they're playing without a contract, just to play football and keep busy. If you sit for as long as 6 months without playing football, you're in trouble. And this time around, we've had COVID as well, which has meant that you haven't been able to just keep fit like a natural footballer would do in an off season where you just go and train. You've been by yourself. So a lot of those free agents have picked up a lot of free weight as well. And now we have the short preseason. It might be a case of, I'm not talking about the Tabus exactly, because like Thabo Matlaba was playing the other day, but a lot of the free agents who were free for the past few months, they're in trouble to find to just be signed by a team. They're going to have to be lucky and maybe go work with a previous coach, because that works out. But there's also, just to play devil's advocate, there's also a thing that we do sometimes write these guys off, or clubs write them off when a player reaches 28, 29. And the motivation that they can use are players like Cheeseboy Mokoena, who spent a year sitting at home doing, not playing after spending a year not playing at Ajax, and can go on to do that. But the lesson in that is he joined Maccabi. He joined a little club. He trialed at a little club and signed the contract and joined, and then things happened with Swallows. Then he won the league. But it wouldn't have happened if he hadn't gone to that little club called Maccabi in the first place. So sometimes beggars can't be choosers. Go play football.
I agree with you. You're right. You can't sit waiting for the perfect deal. In the meantime, your craft is suffering. Gents, let's talk about the award that you've recently handed out, the inaugural SAFJA Footballer of the Season award. In and amongst those who were nominated were the likes of Hlompho Kekana, Peter Shalulile, Lebo Manyama, you had Samir Nukovic, but the outright winner in the end was Themba Zwane. I'd like to find out, since we've got the hierarchy of SAFJA, how those votes were divvied out. How many did Themba get? So who was in second place? Who came third? Then obviously we'll do the same for the women's and find out who the winner or the runners-up are in the women's category. But let's start with the men's, just for a first point of contact there. Themba Zwane, of course, he's won the league. He was in and amongst the goals. He was one of the most important players for Mamelodi Sundowns. There'll always be contention. I kind of saw when your winner came out as to what's happening. People thinking that Samir Nukovic might have been the footballer of the season, but let's go through the numbers, because I'm sure that's exactly where it all kind of came together. Stavej, how did the voting pan out?
Yeah, look, as you know, that the nomination process was done by the SAFJA Exco, 9 members of the SAFJA Exco, and also the 4 esteemed football commentators who are also members of Exco and veterans in this business: Mark Gleeson, Dwayne DeLoca, Thabiso Tema, and also Kevin Evans. So now in total there were 16 nominees. Coming from all the people who were nominating, 16, including the 2 of us here, were also nominating. Right. And part of other nominees who were there included the likes of Cole Alexander, Rashin Direk, Kemit Erasmus, Hlompho Kekana, Dion Hoto, Ndumiso Mapena, Mucheka Madisha, Kabadinho Mango, Bongingo Sunduli, Surprise Ralani, Peter Shalulile, Gaston Sereno, Ronwen Williams, Themba Zwane, and all the guys were there. Yeah. In fact, maybe I must also tell you that someone like Kabadinho Mango, he missed out by only one vote to be part of the top 5. Sereno missed out by 2 votes to be part of the top 5. So this was not easy. But I think if I'm not going to give you the numbers, but in terms of the top 3, just from the nominations, yes, the top 3, it was Themba Zwane, Samir Nukovic, and Peter Shalulile in terms of the votes which were coming through. Just we're talking about only the nominations. But then again, if we are going to be talking about the votes, and I like what Titi, who was our MC today, what he said there, that it was more like a unanimous decision, because Mshishi, in total, he got 59.2%. He got 59.21%. I mean, in total, we have 108 members. In total, 76 voted, and 45 voted for Mshishi. A second place was Samir Nukovic, but he also got only 23% of the vote. Okay. And then followed by Hlompho Kekana, and then Manyama, and in fact Shalulile and Manyama. So it was clear.
he ran away with it. Did Rhoda run away with it? I mean, she was announced a few weeks ago. Was it the same case with her, where she kind of ran away with the numbers as well, or was it much closer when it came to the women's? Or
Rhoda was also another one.
Mm.
You know, even there, it was clear. You know, it was clear there. And well, now we're waiting for the PSL award, the football of the season, and we're going to see. Because this is no different. This is no different. All over the world, where there's a football journalist association or a body representing football journalists, they do this type of awards. And yes, there will always be this debate. There was a debate I was looking the other day when the Football Writers Association in the UK, they came out with Henderson as their football of the season. There was a debate around. There'll always be a
of course.
Debate. But personally, I've been very clear about this season, that this has been the best season. Even Mshishi also says it. I mean, when was the last time you saw an attacking midfielder? A midfielder. And no, we call them attackers these days.
Sure.
Who was on double figures.
For sure.
In the
goals, for sure.
Right? And also, remember, this is PSL competitions we're talking about. We're not talking about just the league here. We're talking about someone who's inspired his team to win a treble. You understand? He was inspirational in his team to win the Telkom knockout, to win the Nedbank Cup, and to win the league. You understand?
You know, I also
we're not just talking about the PS. In fact, the league here. We're talking about PSL competitions in its entirety.
For sure, I hear you.
I think with Mshishi, I just wanted to say, you know, I think this is the first. He's always been brilliant for me. A great footballer, showed a lot of potential. But I think this season is the one where he actually finally that current ability reached his potential, and now he has to raise his game to the next level. And I think it's been his best. I think he also even said it's been his best season that he's ever had. I think he now sees what he can do.
Right.
And I think he's raised the game a bit as well. Because I think all the nominees that, and I'm talking about all 16 of them, had really good seasons. But the truth is that he did stand out, not only with the amount of goals, not only with the amount of assists, but that silverware. That silverware, that's winners are made with silverware.
For sure. No, you're right, guys. And that's that's really simply put. I think maybe people hadn't been looking at it in that prism, that it's across all competitions, and maybe looking towards the league where it has to be said, Nukovic was very effective. But if you look at the length and breadth of a season, then Themba Zwane for sure stands head and shoulders above the rest. Quickly on Sundowns, this letter that's come out from the chairman regarding the situation with Langerman, which they've kind of been absolved. You know what I mean? You know, it was up to Celtic to pick up the error before and not rely on, which I think probably was social media that kind of put them onto it. I mean, if you're not picking it up before the game and only during the game, it's because someone's looked on Twitter and everyone said, hey, how is Langerman, who's on so many yellow cards, even at the stadium and as part of the squad? But now the chairman of Mamelodi Sundowns, Dr. Patrice Motsepe, has written a letter to say they're taking this very seriously and that there might even be ramifications as far as personnel are concerned in the technical team who might be, at the risk of losing their jobs. Is this a fireable offense when you consider that, they've kind of gotten away with the whole thing and, you can, wipe it brown, say we got away with one in the situation. But, or in the spirit of corporate governance, of running like a big club, someone has to, be hauled over the coals for this one, Stavage.
Yeah, well, I think when you consider that as journalists, most of the time we receive that list of suspended players or players in terms of how many yellow cards they are on or players on the suspension list for that weekend, a day before the game or even 2 days before the game.
Sure.
So in this case, the clubs also do receive this information. In fact, one friend was also telling me, who was working for the club, he was also telling me that even though the information would not be directly be received by him, but the person who receives the information from the PSL would then forward that information to a member of the technical team or someone close to the technical team. So I don't know how at Sundowns they were handling this, but I was listening yesterday on Soccer Zone to Coach Pizzo, talking about where he was saying they are all to blame. From the GM at the top to the technical team, they are all to blame. But I know that maybe here even the team manager will get a stick for this. But you should also remember that Sundowns during the bubble, when it comes to the team manager, they're not going to do the team manager to the matches. They will shuffle around, and get maybe an analyst to perform team manager duties because the numbers were limited. But then again, that is not something that should be decided or you should find out about when you're at the stadium.
For sure.
Because it's information that comes prior. So even in team meetings, even at the hotel, this thing should have came up. So look, considering the fact that something of this nature is not happening for the first time at Sundowns, I think something has got to be done about it.
Right.
I was just disappointed to learn that, or to hear that there are people who would have been were excited from within the club that there's a possibility of the trophy being taken, so that it will not be a treble anymore for Pizzo Mosimane.
What?
I mean,
Really, what are you saying now? From within.
For me, this is sad. It's sad that you can wish one of your own that he doesn't do well. Because
I think one of the saddest things about team sport is, unfortunately, they're made up of individuals, and the individuals often have ego battles and things like that. I think I think the letter from Motsepe just goes to show how embarrassed he is. It's not like suspensions are a new thing. They've been happening forever. The truth is that Sundowns, after their game against their previous game, they should have known that Langerman couldn't be selected. Somebody should have informed them then. Langerman should have known.
Guys, the player have
yellow cards he received.
Yeah, but here, what I was saying is that for me, I'm happy that at the end of the day, Sundowns treble, which was one on the field of play, is remaining with them. And even those that Sundowns were wishing that Pizzo Mosimane's name will not be attached next to a treble are eating a humble pie. You understand? And the way people are doing things, if you don't appreciate people, and remember that old saying that there's that very old saying that says, if you don't appreciate me whilst I'm still here, when I'm gone, now we'll realize that we once had a good thing going.
Yeah, no, for sure.
I think this person is not here anymore.
Things are hanging. I'm not sure who's hanging, if it's just myself, but it seems like
yeah, I think it's you.
You hang in there.
Yeah.
I think one of the difficult situations with this is that when you're on top, sometimes it's even people who are close to you that want to pull you down.
But why? Because
it makes
our
no
team
sense.
is succeeding, Rob. Our team is winning things, or is it because
it makes no sense? You often sabotage yourself, but I think we've seen a few times over the years. I mean, where assistant coaches have almost sabotaged their head coaches, and it really is sad, because the truth is that, like I say, sports, or football especially, it's a team sport, and when you do have every part of that team, whether it be technical, working together brilliantly, that's what champions are. You all succeed together, and the quickest way to bring a team down is to sabotage one thing, because it's like that domino effect. Everything comes down afterwards, and I hope that it's dealt with swiftly at Sundowns, because the fact is that I'm thinking back to the when Pizzo won at the end, he was really talking about how much he appreciated his technical team.
Yeah.
I would hate to think it's one of them who've sabotaged him.
No, well, let's hope it's not, because these dark
not, not,
forces.
it's not really the technical team. It's not really the technical team.
Sure.
Because that is his technical team.
Mm.
But some people within the club, these stories have always been there. But I think the whole thing now is rearing its ugly head, and it could have casualties.
Let's hope. I mean, if there's casualties, let's hope it is the dark forces in the club that are going to be forced out, and that everything can then operate in harmony. Because if they're doing so well as it is with those dark forces at play, what more when you get rid of that negativity around the club?
Well, I do think that player management and team management needs a bit of work, because I'm thinking back to the Wayne Arendse situation as well, where, he was added to the team sheet after sitting on the stands. There's certain administration things that I think need to be seen to. And they also, in the same vein, they also, remember the game with the yellow cards, where they all got yellow cards? They all knew about it, the suspensions that day. Why didn't they know about this one?
That's a good point. That's a good point. Gents, thank you so much. I mean, I think we've had a robust 1 hour and a bit of discussion. I really appreciate your thoughts and your time, Rob and Velile. And of course, to you too, who's been on YouTube watching us. We'll obviously turn this around and give you all the best bits. So tell your friends to check out the Front Runner Football Podcast on YouTube, or check us on Twitter, where we're going to give you the highlights bit by bit. Those are always great, Velile. You hit us with some nice sound bites that are totally taken out of context, and then your timeline goes wild. Are you ready for the next edition?
I'm ready for the next edition, but I know.
Give us a quote out of context.
No, he won't do it now. There'll be plenty of those tomorrow. Don't worry. Just check out our Twitter. There'll be plenty of those. Vidal, he must put a
as long as I'm not quoted out of context.
Exactly. So we're going to make sure. We're going to make sure context is everything. Gents, thank you so much for your time. We'll catch up in either later this week or in the new week. But I really appreciate your thoughts and your impressions as always. And I wish you the good start to October. And we'll chat in a couple of days' time, yeah?
Good. Enjoy the rest of the week.
Thank you very much. And to everybody who's watching, enjoy yours too. We'll catch up in a couple of days' time. But please do stay tuned to our Twitter, to our YouTube, and frantsports.com as well is also available. That's where you'll find Rob's latest article as far as the Ajax situation is, just in case you caught this discussion towards the end of the podcast and just want to get up to speed with some of the news in the cycle. For myself, Kamza Mbatha, and the team behind the scenes, until we meet again, have yourselves a good evening. Thank you so much for your time. See you soon. Take care.